What is up, party people? Welcome back. This is chapter 2 with the A in house hacking, or the hacking acronym. We're going to be going over the A portion of it, which stands for assessing your financial situation. I got my notes here, so if I'm looking down, it's because I'm looking at my notes, making sure that I am here for you and I'm covering everything that you are, I guess, looking for, especially when it comes to the lending portion of it with this specific chapter. So if you missed the H part, which is just house hacking, like what the heck is house hacking, the asset behind it, why you should be investing in real estate versus any other asset class, and why it's such a great asset class, that's all in chapter 1. So we're going to be going into making sure that you're financially ready as a borrower and also as a future house hacker and even landlord to make sure you're making the right decision for any sort of like rent opportunities, like what the closing costs might look like, the down payments, what the lender conversation will be, their role in the whole transaction, all that good stuff. That will all be assessed here. So let's get right into it. School is in session. Let's see it. So we're going to be going over the main chapters here. I'm going to make myself a little bit less narcissistic here and make it a little bit smaller. So chapter 1, we're going to be creating a budget, down payment, closing costs, and all that good stuff. Number 2, the mortgage options, why you should be looking at them and why they matter to you. Improving your credit score. Higher score means you're more reliable as a borrower. Calculating your debt to income, and preparing for the first year. So we got 5 big chapters. And before we get into those, I will have this sort of like grand scheme of things, 30,000 foot view of what that all looks like, especially as a borrower working with a lender and a real estate agent at the same time. So assessing your finances, especially as a landlord and a borrower, that will all come up in this one. So that's me. This is your first step to long-term wealth. Congrats on making the first move. Like just educating yourself, it's huge. But using that power, using that knowledge is the ultimate goal here. Like I want you to not only just educate yourself with it, but move in the right direction and make moves with the real estate investing opportunities. So yeah, that's me with an almond croissant. So here's the big sequence of events, the big old like how to understand where this all sits, right? You got to understand how this all looks from a bigger point of view and why this all matters. So you got your 2 people involved with this, right? You got your agent and you got your lender. And you know what an agent does. They look for deals, they analyze the deals, at least investor friendly agents do. And then you got the lender that funds the house for you. So we'll be getting into all of that stuff. So we're going to start and reverse engineer it, right? From like actually owning a home, we're going to reverse engineer it and like how do you even become a homeowner? And this is like that 30,000 foot view. Before you become a homeowner, you need to do the showings, you need to write an offer, you need to do the due diligence when you're under contract. And on the lender side, you need to get pre-approved and all that good stuff. What are your goals, your strategy? So all of that gets broken apart into those main topics. So let's go with the goals. The plans with the agent, we need to know, like, because I'm a real estate agent, I need to make sure that you communicate all the goals that you're trying to do, especially with how much income you're trying to get, how much comfortability you want to have, whether you are mentally ready to, I guess, just go through the motions and become a landlord. I need to know your goals. Is this a home for your family? Are you trying to house hack? Are you investing? Is this a second home, like a vacation home? All of that is very important to communicate, and it will definitely make things a lot more smooth when we're all on the same page. So along with that, that's the house itself. But what about the strategy? So if it's an investment property, are you trying to do the long-term, mid-term, or short-term rental strategy? And all of that comes with its own pros and cons, which I will mention in a later chapter, and which method is best for you. So when we go into a conversation between yourself and myself, I need to know what you're comfortable with, how much time you have for property management, if that's something you want to do, or if you want to hire that out. And I have some contractors and property managers and people within the greater Denver area that can definitely help you out with this whole process, right? So I need to know all this stuff. I need to know what the strategy you're trying to implement is. So on the lender side, I myself am not a lender, but based on what your goals and your strategy is, I can direct you towards a proper lender that can help you with these things. Let's say if you are a veteran, you can utilize a loan that only is applicable for veterans. It's called a VA loan or Veterans Affairs Loan. So we'll use a conventional FHA, USDA, or VA loan. That's all super important for the lender to know. On your finances, the lender will check your debts, your income, and your credit score, and amongst other things, to make sure that you are a proper borrower for this future home. And that's all conversations that you will have with your lender, right? Now, looking at the showings and offer and due diligence side. So once we know your goals and your strategy, what happens next, right? So you go through the deals that I send you and analyze the properties, and we see houses based on your budget, your strategy, and we start writing those offers. And then the due diligence, which I will be mentioning later on, not too in depth, but especially on the pricing side and assessing the financial situation side, that will all be mentioned, especially like what the costs are. So that is the on the as far as the agent goes, that's what that looks like. And as far as the lender goes, with the finances in mind and the type of loan in mind, you have to get pre-approved, and you can get pre-approved before you put in the offer, which I highly recommend you do, because it makes you look like a stronger buyer if you were to put an offer on the place. Let's say if a seller comes in, the seller needs to know that you can close on the property. And if you don't have your finances straight, if you're not pre-approved, it just does not look as strong if you were to come into the transaction with not a pre-approval, right? You now have an approved budget by your lender, and let's go show some houses. So that's a really good way to start it. And with all that in mind, after the due diligence period, you close on it and you're officially a homeowner. So now we move along. What does the lender do? And what's the point of the lender, and like how does this all fit into the grand scheme of things? Maybe you might have a better understanding of what an agent does, but maybe not so much a lender. So which lender would you rather work with? So we have two different types, at least in my opinion. I like to like section them off into two different types. So there's a big institution lender. You're looking at those Wells Fargo, the Chase, even your local credit union. I guess that can be right in between. But there's the big institutions, right? So with those bigger institutions, they have a lot more money behind them. So they have slightly lower rates, which means less monthly payments. And I guess that first bullet, the slightly lower rates, is a pro, right? It is nice to know that you don't have to pay as much per month. And I'm going to be speaking in generalities here. It's not going to be 100% the case with these big institution situations. If you're partnering with them or you're working with them, this is, like I said, very general information. So make sure you communicate what your goals are, and they will guide you in the right direction. So a con, though, the third bullet here, will only pick up their phone within business hours. And I cannot stress how common this is. It's pretty unfortunate, especially when people see that, hey, there's lower rates. But with that, it's almost like contractors, right? With contractors, you have to pick three. You want it quick, you want it cheap, and you want it good quality, right? Pick two of those three, because if you pick two, if you want it more affordable and high quality, it is not going to be cheap. Oh, sorry, it is not going to be done quickly, right? If you want it done quickly and affordable, it's not going to be good quality, right? So you got to choose these things, right? So that's another thing as well. Going pretty deep on that analogy here. So a lender considers you a number rather than a person when you're working with a big institution. And that's pretty unfortunate, right? Like you want to be treated like a person, especially with a big transaction like a lender, right? With a lender, this is like buying a home is a very stressful situation, and you want to like get the hand holding that you need, especially if this is your first home. And I cannot stress the importance of seeing yourself within the transaction as a person to these big lenders versus just a number, right? Because they could be working with dozens, if not hundreds of people all at once, right? So that's something. And you won't have one person working on your file. And that goes back to considering you as a number rather than a person. Of course, like even with smaller lenders, they could have multiple files, but you are likely going to have one person to call. And every time you call that number, that same person's going to pick up and they will have that rapport with you. So now moving on to the small business side, moving myself on to the side, on market or slightly higher rates. Yeah, I guess this, like I said, it's general. So always ask and shop around if you are curious what the markets are like, or what the costs are like with different kinds of lenders, right? So with small lenders, you can text or call before and after business hours, which is great, honestly. And there have been several times where real estate happens Sunday at 8 p.m., right? There's a certain deadline that you need to hit. You need to put in those inspection contingencies or objections. You need to resolve certain things by a certain deadline. And God forbid you have the resolution or the agent comes up with the resolution at 5:30 on a Friday, because that's another 3 days, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and Monday morning where you can't get in contact with the lender. And there's a lot of back and forth that has to happen with the agent and the lender in order for all this to happen, right? So I think that's a really good way for you to have that peace of mind with working with a small business or a local lender. Small, like credit unions included. I think they could be considered more of a small business. I guess it depends on who you work with. They know you by name and they have a relationship with you. And I know a lot of these lenders have a relationship with me as well. I get nothing by working with them. I want to send you connections to lenders because they give you the best service. I get no kickback from it, nor do I want it. I want it to be, um, what do they say? Like, those who live by the money die by the money, right? I do not want any sort of kickback as a sort of like a carrot dangling in front of me, right? So, the reason why I send you a certain lender is because I think that they will give you the best service possible, especially with the strategy and goal in mind. And they're the person you call and text. I think that's another great point. So there's like one slight con to it where, um, like the loan itself will have possibly a higher rate, but everything else, as far as like peace of mind goes, I think the small business and small lender is the way to go. So, because small lenders have a relationship with you, they can help guide you through your first transaction to help you fund the next transaction. So, what will your DTI be, your debt to income ratio? And I'll be going over that and why that is all important. How do you qualify for a higher purchase price? And what needs to happen before you buy your second property? All of that will be answered within this chapter and etc. So number one, finally onto chapter number one. We're going to create a budget here, right? This is what you should be saving, especially on the budget side. So 3 items you need to pay for before closing time. And these are the bigger ticket items. There could be smaller ones. I guess it depends on where you're at in the nation, where you're at as far as wants, goals, and strategies and all that good stuff. But this is what to expect. The home inspections do vary. I mean, going from $400 to $800, and with clients of mine, they usually range between 600 and 800 because I also advise to get radon inspection because we have basements here in Denver, and also a sewer scope. And you just don't want to have a open sewer that's leaking into the lawn, or cracks, or any sort of like bellying where there's a pooling of the water or the sewage. All that stuff gets revealed during the home inspection, so that's important. The down payment also. So let's say if you're trying to house hack, 5% is a number that you could put down. For typical conventional loans that you might be used to or you hear often, 20% down is commonplace, but I would highly suggest looking down to put 5% rather than 500 or rather than 20%. So 5% of 500K is 25K. If you were to look at, let's say, 20% down on 500K, that's $100,000. And it's really hard for anyone to save that kind of money just for one home. Anywho, closing costs, 10 to 15K. It depends on the loan amount and what lender you're working with. There might be incentives from the lender to work with them as opposed to any other lender. And this is very prevalent within new construction. So just keep in mind, it's a big range and you should just talk to the people that are in charge. Example, 500,000 purchase price, which is not too far away from Denver's median home price right now at the end of July of 2024. As of this recording in mid-August of 2024, you're looking at a purchase price of the median home cost of 600,000. So I just put 500,000 arbitrarily. 5% down payment is about 25 grand. Closing costs, about 10 grand. Earnest money deposit, 5 grand. And I'll get into what a earnest money deposit is, or earnest money is, whatever that is. Home inspection with sewer scope and radon test is about, let's say, $750. Total initial cost, $40,000 and $750. $40,750. So what's a down payment? Let's go into like the nitty gritty of like breaking down these things and why this is all important and why you should be even concerned about these costs, right? It's your investment in the home. So that is the amount of money that will be in the home. This is your equity in your home. So that builds over time, but you need that initial money into the home just to like have skin in the game, right? So lenders want to see skin in the game, because if you were allowed to just have a 0% down loan, which there are loans like that, like the VA or physician's loan, or even USDA loan, where you don't have to put any money down, which is great. But lenders do want to see you have skin in the game. It shows that you have ownership and you actually care about the transaction. Because if you don't have any money or any skin in the game, you could just back out and be like, this is not what I want. I'm not serious about it, that sort of thing. So they want to make sure that you're serious. So more money in, less monthly payment. So the monthly payment, the mortgage, the bulk of it is going to be interest. And I believe we're going to be going into a different slide in the future of what that, like the payment schedules look like and all that good stuff. But the more money you put into the home, the monthly payment becomes less. So if you put down, let's say 5%, 95% of it will be covered by the lender, right? So with that huge amount of 95% of the total amount, they tack on interest on that loan amount. So if you were to reduce that loan amount and put in more money, that mortgage, that monthly payment is going to be significantly less. So hope that makes sense. It can be as low as $0. It depends on what loan you want to do. So a 100% down payment, basically you're just buying the home. And let's say if you put down $500,000, you don't need a loan, but you will have to pay taxes and insurance. And you could still have like that automated and all that good stuff. But when someone says they put an all cash offer, it's a $500,000 offer on, let's say, a $500,000 home. So that's a good definition. So what's in the closing cost? That's another thing that was in the initial, framework that I was mentioning earlier. What's in the closing costs? So closing costs includes application fee, appraisal, title fees, lender fees, funding, taxes, and insurance, right? So all of these just get tacked on. And I guess to let you guys know, like the realtor and the lender and everyone involved, except for like, let's say the inspection and all that good stuff, they do not get paid until closing day. So all of this like goodwill and information and statistics and whatever it might be guiding you in the right direction is all for free until you close on that home. And we just want to make sure that you're serious about all this stuff, right? So I guess it's a pro and con. It's a pro for you guys because you guys being first time home buyers or buyers, right? where you don't have to pay like all these fees up front. You can actually get all that added onto, or some of it added onto the loan itself. So closing costs, it will be paid, um, let's say like as a, either upfront or, yeah, it will be paid upfront. Yeah. Okay, yeah, totally. So title fees, lender fees, funding, taxes, insurance. So they like to have taxes and insurance set aside so that, um, like 6 months in advance, because usually taxes and insurance are paid for by the lender every 6 months, right? Or every year, whatever the structure is within your state. So if it's paid on your behalf and the lender pays for it on your behalf, then you don't have to worry about that stuff. And they want to have 6 months of payments already set within that escrow account so that they don't have to worry about it, like when the time comes all the time. So earnest money deposit. What is earnest money? It shows the seller you have skin in the game. So let's say you write an offer, or the realtor writes an offer and you sign off on it and the seller sees it, and the seller wants to make sure that you are serious as a buyer. This is like, the earnest money is an amount of money that is almost like towards goodwill. And if anything bad were to happen, let's say if the buyer just backs out for no good reason, um, or something like that happens, the seller gets to keep that earnest money deposit. So the buyer has incentive to see this go to the closing table. And there are some backstops to that. So let's say if the inspection doesn't go well and the seller doesn't want to pay for what the buyer wants to do, then the buyer can come out of the deal with that earnest money. So the buyer can come out of the deal with its earnest money. But if it is at the buyer's fault, the seller gets to keep that earnest money. And that's very generally speaking. So yeah, there's a lot to it, but this is generally what earnest money is. So usually it's 1% of the purchase price. So let's say it is 5K and a 500K home. I know I mentioned 10K earlier because there are some, I guess putting more money down shows to the seller like that you're more serious. It shows like, hey, it's at a higher risk for you that, um, the seller, or like that earnest money is held in this account. It's in an escrow account. So if you put down more money, it shows to the seller like, oh, okay, he's like, or he or she is in it to win it, right? They're serious about this purchase. So this goes towards your down payment, which is great. So that 5K, let's say it is 5K in a $500,000 home, right? It goes towards the down payment. And that down payment, let's say 5% on a $500,000 home is $25,000. If the earnest money is $5,000, then you only have to bring $20,000 for the down payment of that home. Does that make sense? So it goes towards your down payment. You're paying yourself at the end. Now on to chapter 2, understanding mortgage options. And there's a lot to choose from. So we're going to be breaking them down pretty generally because, um, you know, I'm not a lender myself. I feel like there would be a better time and place for it, especially if you were to talk to a licensed professional lender. So conventional, most popular, most straightforward. Without getting too far into it, Fannie and Freddie, the government-based loans, they they love conventional loans. As you could put as low as 3% down, and that's great. You can repeatedly use it. With FHA, you could put as little as 3.5% down, and they have lower stipulations. Let's say with conventional, I think you need like 650, maybe higher than that, in order for you to like go through it and have a government-based loan or have a government back that kind of loan. With an FHA, you can have like 620, I believe, maybe a little bit lower. Again, don't quote me. Work with an actual lender on it, and it's only for first-time home buyers. But you can there. You can reuse an FHA loan, but you have to refinance out of the original one. So I'll go through all that in a future chapter, maybe not this one, but yeah, that's just good information for people that are looking to buy it for the first time or have a home, like a home purchase for the first time. Most of these require you to live in the property. So, especially if you were to look at, let's say, less than 20% down, it most likely will require you to live in the property. So, a VA loan, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but a VA loan is available only for the military and veterans. So it's very specific, but it is very powerful, especially if you're trying to house hack at the same time. So you could put as little as 0% down, which is great, powerful for house hacking. I mean, imagine coming into a deal and only having to pay for the closing costs and inspections. I mean, as opposed to, let's say, 40 grand coming into the deal, you're now paying, let's say, 12 grand. It's significant, right? Physician's loan. So if you're a doctor, a vet, a dentist, physician as well, all of that is included within these. And of course, like I said, talk to a lender if you're confused or need some clarification on it. And what's great about it too is that you get better interest rates, and only certain lenders do these kinds of loans. So I'm going to tell you a little story here. Physician loans, not all lenders are created equal, like I said earlier, right? Even with those people or those lenders that have physician loans, be very careful with them, because I had to go through well, not had to, but my buyer wanted to go through with this specific lender. And this specific lender um, had that big institution vibe to it, right? They did not answer their calls. They didn't have a text, like a cell phone number that we could text. Um, and they were on like a retreat for 4 days during the last week, right before we were going to close on this transaction. And I needed to know like whether we were closing. I needed to know whether certain deadlines were going to be met. And I was just getting so annoyed. I actually cussed them out. That does not happen very often, but it was very unprofessional. And I was just taken aback at the experience. And my buyer was freaking out too. And I, you know, fronted everything. Basically, we got through it. We closed on it. But I do want to make sure that you are very knowledgeable that not all lenders are created equal with this stuff. So better interest rates, and you bring less to the table with 0% down. It's crazy, right? So I recommend working with the proper lender who has done these loans before. They can get complicated, especially with VA loans. They can also get complicated as well. They go through an additional screening process, inspection process that is not common for the typical loan or typical, like a conventional loan or FHA. So there are others. There's like a USDA loan. There's a second home loan, but I'm not going to go through with those. I feel like these are the most popular in general. So, like I said, if you're curious about those things, you can always text me, call me if you want to reach me, or work with a lender and they'll tell you all that good information. So, number 3, third chapter, or module, whatever you want to call it, improving your credit score. Why does this matter? It matters because if you have a higher credit score, you are seen as more reliable. And this definitely applies to any sort of loan, whether it be personal or, like an auto loan or applying for a credit card. All of that definitely matters, right? So be a solid borrower. So why interest rates? We're going to look at this graphic first, right? The mortgage at number one, at 3.25% interest rate, your monthly mortgage would be $1,500, right? At 5.5% interest rate, with that same house of 350K, your mortgage is 1987. At 7% interest rate, at that same price home, your mortgage payment is 2,300. Almost, what is that? $800 more than if you were to have a 3.25% interest rate. And this is a significantly lower purchase price than like what's typical in like these bigger metropolitan cities like Denver, San Diego, whatever it might be. So this is why people were freaking out with like the rates going from 4% all the way up to 8% earlier this year and even the year previous in 2023. So your interest rate will be affected by the credit score. So average rate based on score, of course, like that will definitely change. So if you have a good score, lenders will see you as a great borrower. So let's go into the text now. Lenders check your credit score. It's a basis on how well you pay off debts. If you pay things on time, if you have several credit lines open, it will, and you pay those off and you don't use it to its maximum credit limit, that all affects your credit score. And I'll be going into it a little bit more later on. How many cards you have, how much you expense, all of that matters. Like I said, consult with your lender to improve your credit score. I know the basic information. I have over 800 in terms of credit score. The thing is that I just pay my stuff on time and have like maybe a handful of credit cards. So that's just a good basis of how to do it. So this is how you increase your credit score. I won't dwell on this too much. Make your payments on time. Just set up auto pay. It's great. Pay down revolving account balances. If you have a max of 15,000, keep the balance below 5,000. And of course, if you pay that on time, you can always increase that 15,000 to more. But this is just an example. Don't close your oldest account. Length of credit history is a factor. Diversify the types of credit that you use. 2 credit cards, auto, home loan will have a stronger credit than someone with just 1 card. So like I said earlier, having several different types of payments is seen as a more responsible adult, especially if you're paying those things on time. Compared to, let's say, someone just having one payment, let's say 1 car payment. All of that does get affected into it. Limit the amount of credit applications as well. Those hard pulls do affect your credit score as well. So why does all this matter, right? Like, the lender is super important with any sort of transaction if you are not paying all cash, like you're paying an all cash offer, which I highly doubt this is speaking to anyone that can pay in all cash for these homes, right? So your lender will fund 90% of the home, even more than 90% of the home, depending on what kind of loan you have, right? This is super important because you want to appease them. You want to make sure that things are going to go well. You want to make sure that they're going to be able to have the government fund the loan once they sell off that loan and Fannie Freddie gets into the mix and all that good stuff. So the reason why we worry about the credit score, the type of loan, what kind of borrower you are, and all that good stuff is because the lender will fund over 90% of your home, which is crazy to me. Also, have a conversation with the lender. Lender will also help you decide how to best manage your credit score and your credit cards for the best terms. So yeah, they want to make sure that it's in their best interest to have you be a good borrower. Because if you're a good borrower, you can borrow more money from the bank or from the lender. So if you could borrow more money, they can get more interest on that amount too, right? So it's in their best interest to make sure that you're good to go as a borrower. So I can't guarantee that a big institution will give you those tips and tricks for credit help, though. They'll probably just tell you, sorry, you don't qualify. They're not going to give you that hand-holding experience like a small lender would if you were to just work with a specific person or a group of people, like a smaller group of people, right? Talk to your lender about your goals. It's all super important. So this is all within assessing your financials. Very important. Number 4, calculating debt to income. Your DTI. What does that mean? What does it include? Debt divided by income equals your DTI. So what is your debt? Add up your monthly bills, including your monthly rent, your student loans, your auto loans, your credit card payments, and use the minimum payments as that basis for your debts. I mean, it's not like you're paying. I mean, even though if you were to pay off that statement in full, they still use the minimum payments as the main debt. So all of that gets added into the debt, and you divide it by the income. Take your gross monthly income before taxes. Of course, all of that does matter, especially when like the like any sort of income. Let's say if you have a side hustle or if you're managing someone's property at the same time, like this is all into the mix, right, of what your income could possibly be. So we're going to go into an example here because let's just drive it home, right? So your debt, grand total debt per month is $2,000. I mean, let's say utilities, the car payments, your credit card statements, all that good stuff, $2,000. Grand total income per month is $6,000. Your debt to income ratio, 2,000 divided by 6,000 is 33%. So pretty basic, nothing too crazy. Your DTI can be communicated from your lender to you. Once they have that like hard money pull, they see your accounts, they go through all that stuff, which is pretty important, especially if you want to get pre-approved and actually go on showings and all that good stuff. They can tell you what your DTI is and how to improve it if you were to get into a situation where it's like you're almost at the cusp of getting to the price range that you really want, but you need to change certain debts or change certain income or pay off certain things all at the same time, right? All of that definitely matters. So we're going to go into DTI limits. So this ties in with the loans, and it's all coming full circle here now, right? It will be difficult to be approved for a loan with a DTI over 50% when you're working with a conventional loan. So you need, according to this graph here, you have that light gray of conventional, 49%, FHA at 57%, and then USDA or VA loans allow you to have a 41% DTI. So FHA is right here. It's actually 43% unless borrower has no other debts but the mortgage. I'm not sure why this is 57 then. Oh, that's the limit. Oh, okay, I see. That makes sense. 43 plus 57 is 100. So now USDA, pretty strict to a 41% DTI. So over here on the right-hand side, notes. DTI ratio is important, but does not account for food, health insurance, utilities, gas, and all that good stuff. Look at all your expenses, not just your monthly bills. To be lendable and be a good borrower, you do need to have those, like you do need to have what the credit score or the credit limit is, the minimum payments, your auto loan, your all that good stuff. All that is super important for the lender. But for you and your financials, what is comfortable for you, you need to also account for food, health insurance, utilities, and all that good stuff. You don't just want to go max budget with the stuff unless you're comfortable with that, but you just don't want to go max budget with it. So, long story short, this like accounting also for food, like groceries, health insurance, gas, and all that good stuff is very important for your well-being and your quality of life. Lowering your DTI means that you get a higher purchase price. When DTI is lowered, you're able to qualify for a higher priced home, if that's something you want, right? You don't have to max out your purchase price always, right? Always put in offers that you're comfortable with, work with your agent and your lender on what makes sense for you. And this definitely matters when, let's say, if a certain home is at a higher price point and you really like it, but you're not going to get as much in rent. Let's say it's a 2-bed, 2-bath, but it's in an okay neighborhood. It's a great home, but it's in an okay neighborhood and it's a 2-bed, 2-bath, right? Versus, let's say you put an offer in on a home that's a 3-bed, 2-bath, where you can get more income on the property as a house hacker, and it's in a better neighborhood, right? Or maybe it's not as good. Maybe it's in the same neighborhood, right? And it's a 3-bed, 2-bath, but you have that extra bedroom. And you're able to, what am I trying to say here? You're able to put in a lower offer so that you can afford more. That all matters, especially with your quality of life and how financially stable you want to be per month. So just putting that out there. Now, like I said earlier, just ask what your DTI is. Ask the lender. I may be making a bigger deal of it than it should be, but this is all super important with like understanding the ins and outs of how all of this works. The lender side, like I said, 2 other times and maybe 3 other times beforehand, I am not a lender or certified CPA or anything like that. You need to talk to a certified professional with this stuff. And if you're ever curious with like what that all looks like and who is out there for you, hit me up and I can connect you with the right person, at least within Colorado. So your lender will be able to calculate your DTI once they do the hard credit pull, like I mentioned earlier. And now we move on to the 5th chapter, preparing for the initial costs. So I mentioned it a little bit with the rehab, the reserves, and all that good stuff. Actually, I haven't gotten into reserves yet, so this is really good. More than meets the eye, like a transformer. Using the example of the $500,000 home, going back to those numbers that we mentioned earlier, 5% down payments, closing costs, earnest money deposit, and home inspection. So before closing, you're spending about $40,000. Crazy. However, you should also prepare for things after closing, right? Talk to your lender to know the specific amount. There's that asterisk next to the $40,000. So make sure you talk to a proper person. Things will break eventually. You need to make sure that you're prepared for these things, right? The roof, the water heater, the appliances, none of this stuff lasts forever. And this stuff will also be identified during the inspection, right? If during the inspection you go through like the water heater, the age of the roof, whether there's any noticeable mold. It's not like they'll be like prying apart the drywall for the stuff, but they will see like water spots if it's visible. They'll check the attic for proper insulation, whether the garage door opens appropriately, all that good stuff. And that all ages with time, right? And so another thing to account for with expenses is that, let's say if you're trying to house hack, but you can't find a renter, right? And I always say to take your time with it. No renter is better than a bad renter. When you have a bad renter, they're going to complain a lot. They're going to mess things up. They're going to clog up the toilet with things that shouldn't be in there. Let's say a teddy bear just flushed down the toilet, right? Or they're just going to light stuff on fire or do drugs in there. Like, take your time with it. But let's say you can't find a proper renter. Set aside at least 3 months worth of full mortgage payments so that you are ready by the time you do find that proper renter, right? You don't want to panic and you don't want to expect like, okay, yeah, like you don't want to, what do you call it? Like be desperate. Yeah, yeah. You don't want to be desperate when you're trying to find that renter. Take your time with it and make sure you're set to go when you try to find a renter. Sorry, I had to drink some water. So now, some other things that you have to take in mind or keep into account is, let's say if you were to work in Airbnb, right? It's not for the faint of heart, and you need to do your due diligence to make sure it is going to be a good deal. There are subscription fees along with it. So if you're doing an Airbnb hosting and management platforms, they all cost a fee. And I highly recommend that you do have those things because it'll just make your life so much easier. Of course, you can also pay for a property manager to operate that short-term rental for you. And yeah, it just depends on you. Depends on what you want to do. If you have a higher leverage income strategy, like if you make more money working on your job than you do managing a property, then keep doing your job and hire out that management, right? So this all depends on the person, the strategy, and the goals they want to do. Yes, we will be getting into those fees and how to operate a short-term rental in a future chapter, in the deal analysis chapter, which is coming up. But for now, it's just something to keep in mind. Utilities and lawn care. It is not free, right? Weekly and monthly costs are definitely expected if you have, a yard and utilities. Oh man, gutter cleaning, mowing the lawn, um, fertilizing it, weeding it, all that stuff comes into play here. And you need to be fully aware that this is going to take some time and this is going to take some money as well. So you need to set aside all that accordingly. And this is all the more reason to start house hacking, right? Like, imagine trying to pay all this stuff up front as just a regular home buyer, right? It kind of stinks knowing that people are trying to get into the game, paying a full mortgage at, let's say, the 6%, 6.5% that where the interest rates are right now. It is significant, right? I mean, imagine paying $4,000 for a $600,000 home. It's crazy. So renting out the rooms, renting out the basement, renting out the garage that's converted into an ADU, all that stuff will help you reach that financial independence sooner than later. So you would be paying a full mortgage anyway with your home. So you might as well just house hack, rent out a room, even if it's to family. I take that back. It will depend on how you structure that agreement with your family member, but nonetheless. So now, setting aside money, I'm going to increase my face here because I'm egotistical and narcissistic. Setting aside money. I usually save approximately 10% of the rental income per month for unexpected expenses. So, for example, if you were to get about $2,000 per month in rent, I would set aside $200 for any sort of water heater breakage, appliance goes out, whatever it might be, right? Your risk tolerance and condition and location of the home will be strong considerations in how much you save per month. Let's say an 1920s build home is going to have a lot more problems than, let's say, a 1990s build home, right? I mean, they're all going to have their own problems. How often they will happen will depend on the condition of the home, where it's located, all that good stuff. So that's all very viable. More on this in chapter 3 in choosing the right property. I have a lot to say about that, especially as a owner of a 1930s duplex in San Diego. I have experience with it. So now variable expenses. Expenses that are not included in the fixed expenses, aka the mortgage, are called variable expenses. If you anticipate to make $2,000 per month, you should allocate a certain amount of that $2,000 per month for these variable expenses. Let's say $100 per month for vacancies if it's an LTR or MTR. Your home will not be occupied 100% of the time, right? So you need to prepare for that every month. Like, you might have a turnover of about 2 weeks. Let's say the cleaners get in there. You have to find a renter. I mean, they have to get settled in and make sure that the timing of the lease is all good to go. So it's not going to be occupied 100% of the time, right? So that all gets factored in. And then $100 per month also for capital expenditures. Things break eventually, like I mentioned. And of course, if you want to be more conservative, it doesn't have to be $100 per month for each of these things. If you feel more bullish that you could find a renter, maybe you leave it at 100, but that just means you save more over time, which is great. But you can also set aside, let's say, $75. I mean, I wouldn't be too liberal with this. I think you should still be conservative with this amount. But nonetheless, capital expenditures and the vacancies, they will happen. You just got to be prepared for them. Utilities and lawn care, you can choose to do the lawn yourself. Anticipate the expense for when or if you move out so that you can hire that stuff out, right? So this is all super important. And I have a story with that too of like, I tried to do the landscaping myself, of like doing a big overhaul on my San Diego property. And I wanted to xeriscape it, not have any bushes, not have any grass, any big plants. I wanted to have a drought resistant landscape, right? To help out with the water costs and just be a good human, I guess, ecological human. I was not built for that. And I have a lot more experience and knowledge, and I can make more money by doing the work I was doing at the time, being an environmental consultant, a geologist, and now being a real estate agent. So you just got to take care of all that stuff. If you don't want to do it, you got to make sure you are allocating for that expense. So the cost of these estimations, $300 for utilities per month. I'm averaging, right? Or like, it really will depend on how many people live in your home, whether it's just you and your significant other, or if it's just you. All of that definitely matters. $100 a month for landscaping. Again, not necessary, but prepare for the cost if and when you move out. So total is set aside. Variable expenses, 5% of the monthly income. This is assuming that it's an LTR. You see this right underneath the big title here. It's assuming it's LTR. Numbers will change for a short-term rental or mid-term rental. So yeah, take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, something to keep in mind. Capital expenditures, also 5% of the monthly income. Utilities, $300 per month. If you're anticipating $2,000 per month in revenue for your rented basement or rented bedrooms, set aside approximately $500 per month to be prepared for almost anything. So yeah, this is all super important. Sorry, my dog's trying to move. There we go. I'm still living in the van, so I'm going through a lot of this, um, yeah, solo, or just working this out. Anywho, set aside approximately $500 per month to be prepared for almost anything. It will definitely give you a cushion, and hey, if you save more, that's even better, right? Huge. And that's about it. So keep in touch. I'm on YouTube. This is probably where you're seeing it right now. I'm also on Instagram. It is no longer ian.realestateagent. It is ian.househacker. You can also send me an email and see me on my school community. I'm also going to be posting this on my school community. You can find me there. I'm active every single day on school. Um, Post on there whatever questions you have. And if this is at all confusing, or if you want to give me a thumbs up or an ups on it, and this school community is 100% free, see me on there. You can also schedule a one-on-one call with me, just completely free. And I'm there for you and making sure that you are making a wise financial decision. As a 3-time house hacker, real estate agent who has helped dozens of people with their house hack, and also investor myself, this is my gift to the world. I want to make sure y'all are good to go on this. So before I say bye, I'll make myself a lot bigger and put myself in the middle. Thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it.